The galaxy had long been under the iron grip of the Xoreth Empire, a ruthless and ancient species. The Xoreth had conquered countless civilizations across the stars. Their fleet was massive, their power unmatched. With each world they took, their hunger for more grew. No one had dared to challenge them for centuries, and no one had ever succeeded. To the Xoreth, they were invincible, their dominance etched into the very fabric of the galaxy. But little did they know, a storm was brewing, one that would shake their empire to its core. One quiet morning, as the Xoreth fleet patrolled the outer rim of their territory, an officer in the Empire's military command center sat at his station, eyes fixed on the data stream before him. The cold glow of the monitors bathed his face, casting a shadow across his sharp features. He was a man of routine, accustomed to the endless flow of information. His job was simple: monitor the borders, track potential threats, and report back to the High Command. At first, it seemed like just another anomaly, a faint signal, barely noticeable amidst the static of deep space. He dismissed it, believing it to be the result of a minor glitch in the system. But as the signal continued, growing slightly clearer, he began to take note. This was no ordinary transmission. The officer leaned forward, his fingers tapping at the console. The signal was encrypted, its source unknown, but something about it felt different. There was a strange rhythm to it, an unfamiliar pattern. He quickly scanned through the various frequencies, trying to decipher the message. And then, as if a veil had been lifted, a strange phrase echoed through the speakers. "Humans are coming." The officer froze. The words lingered in his mind for a moment. Humans? He muttered to himself. Who were these humans? What kind of species would dare to threaten the mighty Xoreth? The officer glanced at the surrounding screens, seeking answers. But there were none. No identification, no clue about the origin of the transmission. The signal was just there. He quickly transmitted a report to his superior, but something inside him nagged at him. There was more to this than met the eye. The message, though brief, seemed to carry an undertone of danger. It wasn't just a statement. It felt like a warning, a challenge. The officer's hands shook slightly as he adjusted the controls, trying to track the source of the transmission. It was faint but persistent. The signal had a distinct direction, and he followed it closely. It was coming from deep within the galactic borders, far beyond where any known enemy should be. But that didn't make sense. The Xoreth had secured every known route. No one should have been able to slip past their watchful eyes. As he zoomed in on the coordinates, his screen flashed. A large fleet, hundreds of ships, was moving towards the Xoreth Empire. His heart raced. This wasn't just some rogue ship or miscommunication. This was real. A fleet, traveling with purpose, was heading straight for them. The officer's breath quickened as he processed the information. The fleet was still too far out to be detected by standard sensors, but it was moving at an alarming speed. It was too fast for ordinary ships. Whoever these humans were, they had technology that far exceeded what the officer had anticipated. His mind raced. Could it be that a species completely unknown to the Xoreth was bold enough to approach their borders? The Xoreth had never encountered such an unknown before. It was unthinkable. The officer quickly sent a message to the command center, alerting them to the approaching fleet. He labeled it a potential threat and attached the message. Humans are coming. He hesitated for a moment. Something about that phrase unsettled him. He had seen threats before, thousands of them. But this felt different. There was an eerie certainty about the words. Humans are coming. The way the message was delivered, with such precision, almost as if they knew they would be heard. The officer leaned back in his chair, unsure of what to do next. His instincts screamed at him to take action, to prepare the fleet, but the orders from above were clear. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. The Xoreth had never been surprised, never had to react so swiftly. But this time, it seemed the unexpected was upon them. He began to type a message to the Emperor himself. The urgency was clear in his mind. He had to warn them. The humans, whoever they were coming. He could feel it in his bones. Before he could finish typing the transmission, a strange buzz filled the room. His screen blinked, and the warning lights turned red. The signal, the one that had been steadily growing, had suddenly intensified. It was almost as if something was blocking his attempts to send the message. The officer's fingers flew over the console, trying to send the transmission. But the system wouldn't respond. The signal, whatever it was, seemed to have jammed everything. His heart raced as he realized what was happening. The fleet, the humans, were closer than he had thought. Too close. The transmission was already upon them. He attempted one last time to send the final message, but it was too late. The signal was cut off abruptly, and the screen went black. The officer looked at the empty console, his mind racing. The last words he had managed to send, before the signal went silent, hung in the air, chilling and final. Humans are coming. As the warning echoed in his mind, he could only hope that the Xorith Empire would understand the gravity of the situation before it was too late. The Xorith Empire had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Their empire was vast, their fleet powerful, and their authority absolute. No one had ever challenged their supremacy, and they believed themselves to be untouchable. But as the transmission about the humans echoed in their military command center, the first true signs of a crack in their armor began to show. The news of the mysterious fleet approaching had reached the Emperor's ears, but his initial reaction was one of disbelief. The Xorith Empire had faced countless threats throughout its long history, but the idea of an unknown species daring to approach their borders seemed laughable. Humans, no one had ever heard of them, and no species in the galaxy had ever been capable of posing a true challenge to the Xorith. They had never known fear, and the very thought of it was alien to them. In the High Council room, the Emperor addressed his commanders. The room was filled with murmurs of disbelief as they discussed the strange transmission. The officer who had first sent the warning stood before the Emperor, his face tense with unease. He had hoped that, upon reaching the higher command, his concerns would be taken seriously, but the Emperor and his advisors were dismissive. "Humans are coming," the officer repeated, his voice steady but filled with a growing sense of urgency. "I tracked their signal. They are out there, beyond our borders, and they're heading in our direction." One of the high-ranking officers snorted, clearly unconcerned. "Do you really believe that some unknown species poses a threat to us? We have crushed every enemy that dared to stand against us. The galaxy is ours to command." But the officer who had discovered the transmission remained firm. "This is different," he insisted. "They are moving faster than any ship we've ever encountered. Their technology. It's unlike anything in our databases. This is not a small fleet we're dealing with. This is something serious." The Emperor, his expression unreadable, leaned forward in his throne-like chair. "You believe these humans are capable of challenging us?" he asked, his voice cold but curious. His gaze never left the officer's face. The officer nodded. "Yes, Emperor. I don't know what they want, but their fleet is real, and it's heading straight for us. I believe they are preparing for something, an invasion." The room fell silent. The mention of an invasion was not taken lightly, especially when it came to a species that had never been heard of before. But there was something in the officer's tone that made the Emperor pause. He could see the tension in the officer's eyes, the fear that was barely being contained. The officer wasn't someone to panic over a minor threat. "I want confirmation," the Emperor said, his voice brokering no argument. "I will not act on mere speculation." Orders were quickly given to gather more intelligence, and a team of the Empire's best scouts was dispatched to track the mysterious fleet. As the officers left the room, the Emperor remained seated, staring out over the vast empire he ruled. The idea of a new enemy, especially one he couldn't control or predict, was unsettling. For the first time in many years, doubt crept into his mind. Meanwhile, the officer who had first detected the transmission returned to his station, determined to get to the bottom of this mysterious warning. He was no longer sure of what he had discovered, but he knew one thing for certain. The humans, whoever they were coming. As the hours passed, the officer worked tirelessly to decode the encrypted signal. His hands shook with anticipation as he sifted through the data, searching for any clue that would reveal the true nature of this new threat. The more he dug, the more unsettling his findings became. The fleet wasn't just a small group of ships, it was vast, covering an area the size of a small star system. And despite being far from the Xorith Empire's borders, the ships seemed to be converging at an unnerving speed. The officer could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He had sent a warning, but the Empire wasn't listening. They were too confident, too certain of their superiority. He had to get the message through somehow. If he didn't, the consequences could be catastrophic. Then, just as he thought he was reaching a breakthrough, a message arrived from the Emperor's office. The Emperor had made a decision. Despite the officer's warnings, despite the lack of concrete evidence, the Xorith military was preparing to ignore the threat and proceed with their current operations. The Emperor had ordered the fleet to continue their patrols without any further changes. The officer's stomach twisted with dread. If the Empire did nothing, the humans would be at their doorsteps before they even realized it. He quickly sent another message to his superior, urging them to reconsider. "We cannot ignore this. The humans are coming, and they are not like anything we've faced before," he wrote, his hands trembling as he typed. But as the hours passed, no reply came. The Xorith Empire was far too confident in its own power. They refused to believe that an unknown species could pose a real threat to them. The officer felt as though he were shouting into the void. As the day drew to a close, the officer's fears grew. He could sense that something was wrong. The humans were coming, and no one seemed to take the threat seriously. The first signs of trouble had appeared, but the Empire was blind to them. Would they realize the danger too late? Would they be ready when the humans arrived at their borders? The officer didn't know, but one thing was certain. A new chapter in the galaxy's history was about to be written, and the Xorith Empire was about to face something it had never encountered before. The tension within the Xorith Empire was thick. For weeks, the mysterious human fleet had been steadily advancing toward their borders, and still, the Emperor and his commanders refused to believe the threat. They clung to their centuries of dominance, convinced that no species could challenge the might of the Xorith. The officer who had first detected the human fleet remained frustrated, trapped in a web of bureaucracy and arrogance. His warnings had gone unheeded, but he could feel the pressure building. The days dragged on as the human fleet moved closer. The Xorith military continued their routine patrols, oblivious to the danger approaching. The Empire's scouts had failed to return with useful information, and those who did made reports that seemed impossible, claims of ships that moved faster than any known technology, fleets that appeared to be more organized than the Xorith had anticipated. It was clear to the officer that something was very wrong, but there was no one left to listen. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough came. A new transmission was received, one that was louder and clearer than any before. It came in at a frequency the Xorith military had never encountered. The message was simple, yet it carried a chilling weight. "Human fleet at the edge of your borders. Prepare for contact." The officer's heart skipped a beat. The words were blunt, and there was something unsettling about the calmness of the message. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement of intent. The humans were no longer just coming. They had arrived. In the grand war room of the Xorith Empire, the usual hum of activity stopped as the transmission was played for the High Council. The Emperor's face was unreadable, but his brow furrowed slightly. For the first time in his reign, the air in the room felt heavier, thicker, as if everyone were suddenly aware that they were standing at the edge of something monumental. "Is this a joke?" One of the high-ranking officers scoffed, clearly dismissive. "We've dealt with countless threats in the past. This will be no different." But the officer who had originally detected the humans stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. "No, this is not a joke. I've been tracking these signals for weeks. The humans have an advanced fleet, one that we can't ignore. They are here." The Emperor turned to him slowly, the weight of centuries of authority in his eyes. "And you are sure of this?" The officer nodded. "Yes, Emperor, we are being watched. They're preparing to make contact. We don't know their full intentions, but they are serious." The Emperor stood from his throne, pacing slowly across the room. His mind raced, and for the first time in years, doubt crept into his thoughts. Could this truly be the beginning of the end for the Xorith Empire? He had always believed in the superiority of his race. But these humans, who were they? What did they want? The quiet hum of the war room felt louder now as the Emperor made a decision. He knew he had to act. But how? The last thing he wanted was to be caught off guard. He turned back to his commanders. "Prepare the fleet. We will not be taken by surprise," the Emperor ordered. "Send word to all sectors. Alert the battle commanders. We will show these humans the true power of the Xorith Empire." But as the orders were given, there was a small part of the officer's mind that hesitated. The Emperor's words were strong, but did they come from confidence or fear? The officer couldn't tell, but he knew one thing for certain. They were not ready for what was coming. Out beyond the borders of the Xorith Empire, the human fleet advanced. The officer had been tracking their progress, watching as their ships neared. The humans' movements were calculated, precise, and efficient. It was clear that they weren't just another alien species. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the fleet approached the outer reaches of Xorith space, the officer's thoughts turned to the warning he had sent. "Humans are coming," he had said, but it felt like a lifetime ago. Now, the words had taken on a haunting finality. They were no longer coming. They were here. In the vast, cold void of space, the human fleet was a sight to behold. Their ships, sleek and imposing, moved with a precision that spoke of years of preparation. Each ship seemed to communicate an unspoken message. "We are here. We will not be ignored." And then, as the human fleet drew closer to the edge of Xorith space, something unexpected happened. The Xorith Empire's military scanners picked up an unusual signal, a signal that seemed to be directed straight at them. It was a message, but this time, there was no encryption, no warning, only one line, spoken in perfect Xorithian. "We've arrived." The words echoed through the command center like a thunderclap. The Empire had been warned, time and time again. But now, the humans had made their move. They weren't just a threat. They were a challenge that the Xorith Empire wasn't ready for. The officer stared at the signal, his heart racing. The time for ignoring the humans was over. The time for action had arrived. The Xorith Empire would soon learn the terrifying truth. They were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. The humans were here, and they had come to take their place. The Xorith Empire's war room buzzed with activity as the fleet's commanders scrambled to prepare for what was about to unfold. The chilling message from the humans still echoed in the air, and no one could shake the feeling of impending doom. They had all heard of the galaxy's many races, but humans were something new, a species none of them truly understood. And now, the Emperor's decision to engage them in battle seemed to be their only course of action. Commander Varric, one of the Empire's most skilled strategists, stood before the Emperor, a map of the galaxy's outer borders displayed on the holoscreen in front of them. His eyes scanned the human fleet's position, which had now been confirmed to be at the edge of their territory. "Emperor," Varric began, his voice steady but with a hint of concern. "The humans are unlike any species we've encountered before. Their ships, their tactics, there's something about them that feels different. I recommend we approach this with caution." The Emperor glared at the commander, the lines on his face deepening. "Caution. We've always dominated every species that has dared to challenge us. Varric, do you suggest we back down from these humans?" His voice was harsh, but there was an underlying uncertainty in his tone. Varric hesitated, his hands clasped behind his back. "I'm not suggesting we back down, Emperor, but we must acknowledge that these humans have outsmarted our defenses. They know our systems, they have found our weak points. We don't know their true capabilities, and their ability to get this close to our borders without detection is not something we can overlook." The Emperor's eyes flickered toward the whole screen. The human fleet, though smaller in size than the mighty Xoreth armada, had an eerie precision. Their ships moved with purpose, silently cutting through space, as though they were on a mission, something far more calculated than mere conquest. "Send out the battle orders," the Emperor said, his voice thick with determination. "We won't allow them to push us back. The galaxy has known the Xoreth Empire's power for millennia. Let them know what happens when they challenge us." The orders were sent, and the Xoreth warships began to move into position. Their massive hulls were an intimidating sight, with armaments capable of obliterating planets. The Xoreth had never lost a battle on their home turf, and they weren't about to let some unknown enemy change that. But as the fleet prepared for battle, the officer who had been tracking the human fleet felt a growing unease. From the moment he had first detected the human signals, something about the humans' presence had struck him as unsettling. He couldn't place it, but the humans weren't like the other species they had conquered. There was something resilient about them. They weren't just fighting for dominance. They were fighting for something much deeper. "Are we sure we're ready for this?" the officer muttered to himself as he stared at the looming human fleet on his monitor. He shook his head. "We've always been ready for any enemy, except this one." Back on the human ships, the crew was ready. Commander Taylor, a veteran officer who had seen countless conflicts throughout her life, stood at the helm of the flagship, the Defiant. She stared out into the vastness of space, her eyes narrowing as she saw the Xoreth fleet closing in. "We've been waiting for this moment for a long time," she said, her voice steady. "These people, these Xoreth, have ruled the galaxy with fear and bloodshed for far too long. Today they will learn that the humans will not kneel. We fight not just for survival, but for everything they've destroyed." Behind her, the crew buzzed with energy. They weren't just facing an enemy. They were facing an empire. An empire that had crushed species, wiped out civilizations, and expanded its terror across the stars. But the humans weren't like the others. They had something that the Xoreth could never take away: the strength of unity and the resolve to protect their home. "Lock all weapons," Commander Taylor commanded. "Prepare for the opening salvo. We will make our first strike count. Let them know that we are here, and we will not back down." As the human fleet moved into position, the tension was palpable. The battle had begun, and for the first time, the Xoreth Empire was not certain of victory. They had underestimated the humans, thinking they were just another species to crush beneath their boots. But the humans were not afraid. As the first shots rang out, shattering the silence of space, both fleets clashed with fury. The Xoreth ships fired their deadly laser beams, each shot capable of tearing through the toughest armor. But the human ships, though smaller, were nimble. Their agility and precision caught the Xoreth off guard, causing their attacks to miss or glance off their shields. The humans fought with a speed and efficiency that even the Xoreth had never seen before. In the midst of the chaos, the officer watched in awe as the human fleet unleashed a series of devastating counterattacks. Their weaponry, though not as advanced as the Xoreth's, was strategic and highly effective. The Xoreth warships, once impenetrable, were now facing a force that seemed to predict their every move. "This is impossible," the officer muttered. "How can they be so precise? How can they anticipate us like this?" The Xoreth fleet struggled to adapt to the humans' unrelenting assault. It was clear, this was no ordinary fight. The humans were more than just a military force. They were a reckoning. As the battle raged on, the humans showed no sign of slowing down. The Xoreth Empire had been dominant for centuries, but now they faced an enemy who was not afraid to fight back. The moment had come, and the humans had made their intentions clear. The battle for the galaxy had begun, and there was no going back. The sound of explosions filled the air as the battlefield raged in the cold emptiness of space. The once feared Xoreth fleet, with its unmatched power and advanced weaponry, was beginning to falter under the unrelenting assault of the human forces. Their ships, small but agile, moved with precision, dodging blasts and counterattacking with ferocity. It was clear to all watching that the humans were unlike any species the galaxy had seen before. Commander Varric, standing at the heart of the Xoreth command ship, watched with growing frustration as his fleet struggled to land a decisive blow. His battle strategies, honed over decades of warfare, were no longer enough. The humans were unpredictable, adapting rapidly to every move that Xoreth made. They weren't simply fighting. They were learning, evolving, and countering in real time. How did this happen? Varric growled, gripping the console tightly. Our intelligence failed us. The humans, they're more than just a threat. They're something else entirely. The Emperor's face twisted in anger as he paced back and forth, his eyes flicking between the chaotic reports flashing on the screens. He had never experienced anything like this before. His empire had faced countless enemies, and none had ever dared to challenge them with such resolve. You promised me victory, Varric. The Emperor snarled. You told me these humans were no match for us. I was wrong, Emperor, Varric admitted, his voice low. The humans, they've caught us by surprise. Their tactics are different. They don't fight like other species. They adapt quickly, and their resolve is stronger than we anticipated. A deep silence fell over the room as the reality of the situation settled in. The once feared Xoreth fleet was beginning to lose ground. Their flagship, the Nightwing, had already sustained significant damage, its shields flickering weakly as it attempted to evade a barrage from the human fleet. Back on the human ships, Commander Taylor remained calm despite the chaos unfolding around her. The human fleet was smaller, yes, but they had one undeniable advantage. They fought with a unity and resourcefulness that the Xoreth could not comprehend. Every crew member, from the officers to the soldiers, had a single purpose: to defend their home and secure the future of humanity. Commander, we're holding steady, Lieutenant Rhodes reported, his voice steady but laced with urgency. The Xoreth are getting more aggressive, but their attacks aren't as precise as they think. We've got their battle tactics figured out. Good, Commander Taylor said, her tone firm. Keep pressing them. We need to break their resolve before they adapt again. Don't let them regroup. As the humans pushed forward, the Xoreth fleet began to show signs of cracks in their once immovable strength. The Nightwing, the pride of the Xoreth Armada, was now limping, its once dominant weapons failing to hit their targets. The human ships were relentless, circling around it like a swarm of hornets, exploiting every weakness and punishing every mistake. Target their engines, Commander Taylor ordered, her eyes scanning the battle map. If we disable their flagship, the entire fleet will lose cohesion. A wave of confirmation rippled through the crew as they executed the order. In moments, the human ships had surrounded the Nightwing, unleashing a barrage of missiles aimed at its engine cores. Explosions rang out, and the Xoreth flagship shuddered violently, its speed reduced as its engines sputtered. For the first time in centuries, the Xoreth fleet was vulnerable. The Emperor, watching in disbelief, clenched his fists in frustration. They've disabled the Nightwing, he hissed. Prepare the backup ships. We cannot lose now. But it was already too late. The human fleet pressed forward with relentless determination, taking advantage of every opportunity. The Xoreth ships were slow to react, and before long, their shields began to fail. One by one, the mighty warships began to crumble under the precision of the humans' attacks. Varric stood frozen, his mind racing. This is not how it was supposed to go, he muttered. We had them. We had the advantage. As the Nightwing struggled to stay afloat, Commander Taylor's voice crackled through the comms. This is the human fleet. You've underestimated us. Xoreth, We're not here to take your galaxy. We're here to show you that the days of your empire's terror are over." The Xoreth, stunned by the sudden reversal of fortune, fought harder, but their once unshakable confidence had been shattered. Their fleet, once thought unbeatable, was now in disarray. The humans, though smaller in number, had shown that they could turn the tide of battle with nothing but sheer will and unrelenting drive. Commander Varek looked at the wreckage of the Nightwing and then at the human fleet, which continued to press their advantage. He knew that the Xoreth Empire had never faced an enemy like this before. These humans were not just a species to be conquered. They were a force of nature. With a heavy heart, Varek turned to the Emperor, his voice filled with defeat. "It's over. We can't win this. The humans, they've broken us." The Emperor stared at the screens, his eyes wild with fury. "No," he snarled. "I will not be defeated by these creatures. Prepare the final weapon. If we cannot conquer them, we will destroy them." But as the final weapon was prepared, it became clear that the humans were already one step ahead. They weren't here to play by the rules. They had come to change the game forever. And the Xoreth were about to learn a harsh truth. They were not the most dangerous species in the galaxy anymore. The humans had arrived, and they weren't going anywhere. The once proud Xoreth Empire, its warships battered and its fleet on the brink of collapse, faced a new harsh reality. For centuries, they had been the apex predators of the galaxy, striking fear into every species they encountered. Yet, in a matter of days, a new force had risen from the depths of space, a force called humanity. Now, in their moment of desperation, the Xoreth were preparing for their final stand. On board the Nightwing, the Emperor's most trusted officers gathered, their faces grim. The damage to their ship was severe, but the final weapon was almost ready. A weapon unlike anything the humans had ever seen. A weapon that could turn the tide of battle in the Xoreth's favor, if only for a moment. Commander Varek, his armor still bearing the marks of battle, stood at the command center. The Emperor's orders had been clear. Use the final weapon to destroy the human fleet, no matter the cost. "We will not be defeated," Varek muttered to himself, gripping the control panel as the weapons systems powered up. "We will show these humans what true power is." Meanwhile, Commander Taylor stood at the helm of the human fleet, her expression unwavering. The battle had been hard, but they were still standing. Her ships, though battered, were in good shape compared to the disarray of the Xoreth. They had broken the enemy's confidence, but she knew that the fight was far from over. The Xoreth were a desperate, dangerous enemy now. "Commander, the Xoreth flagship is powering up something massive," Lieutenant Rhodes reported. "We don't know exactly what it is, but it's not a standard weapon." Taylor's mind raced as she processed the information. The Xoreth were desperate, and that could mean only one thing. They were willing to destroy everything if it meant taking the humans down with them. "All ships, take evasive action," she ordered. "Brace for anything. We'll take them down before they can launch whatever they're planning." But it was too late. With a deafening roar, the final weapon of the Xoreth Empire fired, a massive beam of energy, ripping through the darkness of space, aimed directly at the heart of the human fleet. The beam, glowing a brilliant shade of crimson, tore through several human ships in its path, causing massive explosions. The Xoreth were trying to make their last stand, and they were putting everything they had into this one attack. But the humans weren't done yet. Commander Taylor watched in horror as several ships exploded, but she didn't panic. "This isn't over," she muttered to herself, rallying her crew. "We've been through worse. We're not going to let this stop us." As the Xoreth flagship fired again, the human fleet surged forward with renewed determination. They would not give in to fear. The human ships moved as one, dodging and weaving, avoiding the deadly beam by mere inches. The Xoreth had underestimated their speed, their agility, and their will to fight. And then it happened. With a precise, coordinated strike, the human fleet launched a counterattack. They fired everything they had, unleashing waves of missiles and energy blasts at the Nightwing. The Xoreth flagship, already weakened by the earlier battle, was unable to withstand the onslaught. Its shields collapsed, and the ship erupted in a massive explosion, its once proud form disintegrating into the void. The Emperor, witnessing the destruction of his flagship, let out a scream of rage. He had underestimated the humans. He had believed their threats to be empty, but now the reality was clear. The Xoreth were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. Commander Varek, watching in disbelief as the Nightwing was destroyed, realized that the war was lost. His empire was crumbling, and the humans had proven their worth. There was no way to win this battle now. The humans. They've done it, Varek whispered, his voice breaking. They've defeated us. In the remains of the Xoreth fleet, chaos reigned. Ships that once moved with perfect coordination were now scattered, their crews demoralized and lost. The humans had broken their resolve, and nothing the Xoreth could do would stop them now. On the human ships, Commander Taylor and her crew shared a brief moment of silence. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The Xoreth were defeated. The humans had won. Prepare for the final strike, Taylor said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. Let's end this. As the remaining Xoreth ships attempted to regroup, the human fleet moved in for the kill. One by one, the enemy ships fell, their defenses broken and their resolve shattered. The Xoreth Empire, once the terror of the galaxy, was no more. As the last Xoreth ship was destroyed, Commander Taylor stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The war was over, the humans had won, and the galaxy would never be the same. But the victory came with a price. The battle had been hard, and many lives had been lost. The human fleet had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, but they had also learned something invaluable. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of their people, their home, and their place in the galaxy. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Commander Taylor knew one thing for certain. The humans had made their mark on the galaxy. They had shown that no empire, no matter how powerful, could stand against them. The Xoreth were defeated, and the humans had proven their place among the stars. The battle was over. The last remnants of the Xoreth fleet drifted aimlessly in the vastness of space, their once mighty empire reduced to nothing more than a memory. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, surveyed the wreckage. It had been a long, hard fight, but they had emerged victorious. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a new power, a force that had shattered the legend of the Xoreth Empire. Commander Taylor stood on the bridge of the flagship Valor, staring out at the remains of the battlefield. The stars twinkled faintly in the distance, and the occasional explosion echoed through the emptiness of space as the last of the Xoreth warships were dismantled. There was no cheering, no celebration, only the quiet realization that they had won. And with it, a heavy burden had been lifted. "We did it," Lieutenant Rhodes said quietly from behind her. Taylor nodded slowly. Yes, but at what cost? The war had claimed many lives, both human and alien. The damage to their fleet was substantial, and several of her officers had been lost in the heat of battle. The victory was bittersweet. Still, she knew that they had not just defeated the Xoreth. They had sent a message to every species in the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. "Prepare a message to all sectors," she ordered. "Let everyone know the war is over. We won, but the galaxy is not safe. We've made a powerful enemy, and we must stay vigilant." The communication went out, carried by countless ships, satellites, and signals across the galaxy. News of the human victory spread like wildfire. Species that had once feared the Xoreth Empire now found themselves facing a new reality. The humans had emerged as the galaxy's new force to be reckoned with. For the next few weeks, the human fleet moved through the remains of the Xoreth-controlled space. They offered assistance to the planets that had been oppressed under the Xoreth's rule, helping them rebuild and establish new governments. It was a delicate process, filled with challenges, but the humans were up to the task. Commander Taylor found herself speaking with leaders from various worlds, forging new alliances and offering aid where it was needed most. Many of the planets that had been under the Xoreth's boothiel were wary of humanity's presence, unsure whether the humans would follow in the footsteps of their former enemies or offer genuine help. But Taylor made it clear, humanity was here not to conquer, but to help build a better future for everyone in the galaxy. Despite the victory, the humans knew the war was not truly over. There were still remnants of the Xoreth Empire scattered throughout the galaxy, small factions and rogue warbands that had refused to surrender. These remnants posed a threat, and it would be some time before the last of the Xoreth forces were eradicated. But humanity's reputation was growing. Their resilience, their ingenuity, and their unrelenting will to fight had won them the respect of allies and enemies alike. But even with this newfound respect, Commander Taylor knew that humanity's true test was yet to come. The galaxy was a vast, complex place, and as much as they had proven themselves against the Xoreth, new challenges were always on the horizon. The battle for survival was never truly over. As the Valor set course for the next sector, Taylor stood once again on the bridge, gazing out into the unknown. She had led her people to victory, but she knew there were still many questions unanswered. What would be the true cost of their newfound power? Would humanity be able to hold on to their place in the galaxy, or would they, too, fall into the cycle of empire and destruction that had claimed the Xoreth? "We've done the impossible," Taylor said quietly to herself. But the real test is just beginning. Behind her, the crew of the Valor continued their duties, preparing for the journey ahead. They had shown the galaxy that humanity could take on the mightiest of empires and win. But what lay ahead would determine if that victory was just the beginning of a new chapter, or if it would mark the end of humanity's rise. As the ship moved into deep space, the stars once again filled the viewports, vast and infinite. And in that infinite expanse, humanity's place had been secured. For now, they had proven that no force, no matter how ancient, could stand against them. But the galaxy was still vast, and there were more challenges to come. One thing was certain: the humans had shown they were ready for whatever came next. The new era had begun.